Acorn. Okay, heard of Acorn before, right? The CAC, as it was closing down, they created another pilot program called the GROW Network that was starting up in New York. Acorn, GROW Network, the connection in New York as well as in Chicago. And quite frankly, the guy who did get the job as the new chair of the Department of Education was from New York. It's New York, Chicago, the liberals who control those areas, the community organizers, the communist organizers, quite frankly. Now, this is founded by David Coleman, who is known as the architect of Common Core standards. Here's the connection. Common Core. They do not want Johnny to read or write. They want Johnny to hate. They want to fill you with nothing but contempt and tribalism and not have the means of production. They don't want you focused on creating things, on creating jobs, on creating widgets. They want to create strife and division and take this down. So they created this GROW Network in New York. Out of that came Common Core. That is where we are today, folks. When we come back, we're going to talk about Hillary Clinton. She actually spoke today because she had the cover of the Dallas tragedy. We're going to talk about the timing of all this. We're going to talk about the response and the fallout with Hillary Clinton, because we're not going to let her get away with using this as cover. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Timing is everything. And this last week, when we saw what happened with Hillary Clinton and the conclusion of the FBI's investigation into her, the timing should tell you that the fix was in. We could see this at the beginning of the week, and of course, it only got worse as the week progressed, and we learned that the deposition was going to be on perhaps the slowest news day of the year, the Saturday before 4th of July weekend. To back that up, take a look at what the AP says about ratings during this period of time. And they say it was no fun for Fox News. The network recorded the lowest ever viewership average for a week by one of the 4 biggest broadcast networks. Now, it wasn't a bad week in general compared to everybody else for Fox. They say Fox News Channel was the week's most popular cable network. Nevertheless, they say because of barbecues, fireworks, other outdoor activities, the weeks around July 4th are often the least watched time of the year in television. Networks usually plan accordingly, and so do crooked politicians. They plan accordingly. They release their news on a Friday because they know that people aren't going to be paying that much attention, and they release the really big exposures on the 4th of July weekend, something that's really damaging. Look, they're going to have the Guccifer hearings coming up on Labor Day. You think that's a coincidence? It's not a coincidence. It shows you that the fix has been in. Now, as we look at this and as this continues to unfold, Hillary Clinton didn't respond until today. But people were talking about it earlier in the day. They said, well, Clinton faces a tough decision as to whether or not she's going to address the media about the FBI. That was the headline from The Hill. And the Washington Post says, well, here's exactly how long it's been since Hillary Clinton held a news conference. Because remember, Loretta Lynch didn't hold a news conference. She didn't hold a press conference. She talked to one friendly interviewer who was throwing her softball questions and helping her to present a narrative to diffuse the situation, saying, oh, you wouldn't throw a former president off of the plane, would you? And you guys are just good friends. So that's why you didn't recuse yourself. That's one of the prime reasons you would recuse yourself, but especially when you're caught on the tarmac in a tete-a-tete with the former president whose wife is under investigation, who himself is under investigation, sources say. But how long has it been since Hillary Clinton held a press conference? So the Washington Post points out it was December the 4th, 2015. They went back and said, well, it's 216 days. Now it's 217 days because it was yesterday they asked that. So people were saying, why isn't she holding a press conference? Well, today she had a one-person interview with Wolf Blitzer on CNN, the Clinton News Network, where he asked her some softball questions and let her get away with it like this.
Do you acknowledge you were extremely careless?
Well, I think that director clarified that comment to some extent, pointing out that some of what had been thought to be classified apparently was not. The State Department also made that clear.
So you see how she rolls this out? She waits until the day when everybody is preoccupied with the tragedy in Dallas, and then she tells another lie. She said the director pointed out that some of the things that he thought were classified weren't. But he pointed out that there were a lot of things that were sent and received as classified documents. He laid out the case for a felony, then he let her walk. And as I said, this was orchestrated. Take a look at what Jerome Corsi, WND, pointed out about Comey's long history of helping the Clintons. Now, he goes back and talks, first of all, 2004. Comey, who was then Deputy Attorney General in the Justice Department, limited the scope of criminal investigation for the Sandy Berger case. He's always, and always will be, referred to in my family as Sandy the Burglar Berger. Why? Because he went into the National Archives, took out classified documents, was caught stuffing them in his pants, in his pockets, walked them out of the place, and then was allowed to destroy them outside the National Archives. Why was he doing that? He was doing it to cover up some of the security violations and machinations and conspiracy plots, evidently, of the Clinton administration. The first one, Bill Clinton. The buildup to the 9/11 terrorist attacks. He wanted that information out of there because it showed a pattern of behavior that people were starting to tie together with what happened in 9/11. So he destroyed all those documents. You want to talk about the missing 28 pages? What about all these pages that their close associate, Sandy Berger, stuffed in his pants, okay, and got out? Now, Mr. Comey helped him get away with that. Mr. Comey and Loretta Lynch were both U.S. attorneys in the Southern District of New York, and they crossed paths in the investigation of HSBC, the bank that was too big to jail, just like Hillary Clinton. Remember the bank that laundered money for terrorists and for drug cartels and did it not once, but twice. And it was the second time people said, wait a minute, you already gave them probation. What are you going to do now? You're going to jail some of these people? You're going to pull their charter? No, said Eric Holder's Justice Department. They're too big to jail, essentially. And Lynch and Comey were a part of that. Don't forget also that he was also a part, going back to 1996, 20 years ago. Remember, there were a lot of scandals as Bill Clinton was running for re-election in 1996. There were scandals of selling influence to the Chinese government, of the money flowing into the Democrats committee as well as to the Clintons. There was also a Whitewater investigation, and part of that whitewash was, guess who? James Comey, who was Deputy Special Counsel back in 1996 as part of the Whitewater whitewash. Now, as we had a questioning of Comey on Capitol Hill, they asked him, well, could she have been fired? And he said, well, I'm highly confident that there would be no criminal prosecution no matter who it was, he said, but there would be a range of discipline if this were to happen. He said you could be walked out, or depending on the nature of the facts, you could be reprimanded. The director also said that sitting FBI officials might lose their security clearance. They might have their clearances reviewed or to be subject to other adjudication on the same matter. In other words, if she was just an employee, she might have been fired. And of course, we've seen what happened to people like whistleblowers, especially Thomas Drake, who they classified documents that were in his possession that were not classified and said, well, they're not classified. You should have known that they were misclassified, and so we're going to charge you with having classified documents. When she had documents that came into her possession immediately that were born classified, they allowed her to walk on that. An amazing double standard. We've talked about that before, but now the State Department is going to reopen a probe into the Clinton emails, because even though Hillary couldn't be fired, they're going to look for some people to scapegoat and to fire out of the Department out of the State Department. We have Marco Rubio leading the Senate to push a bill to strip Hillary of her security clearance. Does that sound like that's overly partisan to you? Understand that during Bill Clinton's administration, John Deutsch, who was the director of the CIA, did exactly what Hillary Clinton did, had classified documents on his personal computer at home. He was not only fired, but he was stripped of his security clearance. And in order to keep him from going to jail, he was pardoned by Bill Clinton for that as well. And there's one other possible consequence that may come up, but it's not a consequence at all. They say they may have a referral for perjury for Hillary Clinton. They asked the director if anybody had talked to him about her committing perjury to Congress. And he says, well, nobody has referred that to us. And they said, well, we'll get that to you right away. But understand, who's going to do the investigation? Oh, well, that would be Comey, wouldn't it? And who would make the decision as to whether or not they were going to prosecute her? Oh, that would be Loretta Lynch. So you understand, absolutely nothing is going to happen with that. Now, real quickly, on another subject, a Judge Report has pointed out that Christiana Figueres, a former climate change chief who helped to push through the Paris Climate Change Accord, may become the new head of the UN. Look at her right there. Now, it's interesting, look at her name. And of course, the way Treasury report it was Christiana. I guess the way we would pronounce that would be Anna Christ, because it may very well be, as Alex Jones pointed out in his special report, may very well be the people who come in and mop up the revolution that Bill Ayers and Obama want to start with this race war. And as we look at this, understand that world government, I believe, is going to come at us through the trade treaties that are being pushed, because that's the way they push consolidation politically, is through economic consolidation, as well as giving a rationale for a global governance through climate change. That is the imperative that they have to push to people. That is what people are concerned about on the Democrat side and Hillary's side, that Bernie Sanders is going to try to push that too hard. They want to bring it on you gradually, but things are beginning to accelerate. Stay with us. Margaret Howell will break down how the federalization of the police is coming at us, and we're going to talk to people on the street, get their impressions of what happened in Dallas. We'll be right back.
Well, I'm Margaret Howell reporting for INFOWARS.com. We've seen the Black Lives Matter movement in the news lately, more so than ever the past week, in relation to the deaths of Philander Castile and Alton Sterling at the hands of police officers. Now, before we get into the specifics of police shootings and these deaths, I want to play you the president's response to these killings. Take a look.
When incidents like this occur, there's a big chunk of our fellow citizenry that feels as if, because of the color of their skin, they are not being treated the same. And that hurts. And that should trouble all of us.
Now, unlike the liberal opportunistic freaks on the left and the neo-Nazis on the right, we actually care about all lives. We care about black people getting shot and killed unjustly in this country, of course. And I hate to see cases like this, but we heard our president use a very troubling narrative. He's race baiting. He's inciting more violence by using the narrative that he is and making this a race issue, making this a one-sided problem and fueling the anger. Now, I want to take you to my second clip. It's of the Dallas shooting. This happening last night where 5 police officers were killed. Take a look at this footage.
Don't shoot! Madison! Oh, no! Madison, go! Holy
We saw that horrific footage where a sniper actually gunned down 5 police officers that were attending to a protest scene. And the troubling issue here is that we're seeing a push now for the federalization of all local police officers in this country. And I want to take you to my third clip. It's a clip of a local sheriff. He told Megyn Kelly that he thinks that federalization of the Chicago police is in order because they're causing a murder crisis. Take a listen to what he has to say.
I'm trying to figure out why a state of emergency hasn't been declared in parts of the city of Chicago, why there's no curfew in place from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. The first thing they need to do is stem the violence at nighttime. Somehow they have to stop the bleeding, but Rahm Emanuel seems incapable of doing this. I just need to know how many more black people have to be shot and killed, like Director Comey said, before somebody thinks that this is an emergency.
Now, Sheriff Clark isn't alone in calling for martial law in cities, which aligns with the narrative that we should federalize, nationalize our police force. Al Sharpton has the same sentiment. I brought his clip for you. Take a look at what he says.
There must be national policy and national law on policing. We can't go from state to state. We've got to have national law to protect people against these continued questions.
We hear Al Sharpton akinning the national policing legislation to the Civil Rights Act, and he says there must be a national policy, a national law on policing. We can't go from state to state. We